What up? This is Chris, and today I am shooting my second part to the Manic Depression series. So I did the before medication. Now this video is based on the process of during medication, so while I am on medication. Now, just to give you a brief overview. It's a little cold out here right now. Trying to adjust to this weather. To give you a brief overview of what happened last video, I basically talked about how I really didn't want to take medication and how I knew it was time. So I started with I didn't want to take medication, and then I started thinking about it because I didn't really see any other clear options at the time. And then it got to a point where mentally I was just so unstable where I finally went to a psychiatrist and got the diagnosis of manic depression, bipolar type 2, and started taking the medication. So now let's fast forward a little bit. I'm taking the medication and things are on the rise for me. I'm taking Lamotrigine, and I start off at 50 milligrams, and then I go up to 100 to 150 to 200. And now this was over a course of several weeks that I did this. Now, while I am there on 200 milligrams of Lamotrigine, I feel very stable. Now, when I paired the martial art training with this medication, I found a solid balance between the two. So with the martial art training, I really found more of that spiritual element, and with the medication I really found a balance within my mind. And to put it more simply, I really felt like, this is kind of cliche, but my heart was opening a little bit more the more I stuck with martial arts, and the more that I was diving deeper into martial arts. I really found some answers that I was looking for. I really started to discharge some of the anger that was within myself. I started moving my body, and I'm hitting things, and I'm learning how to use my body in different ways, and it was a form of controlled chaos. And if you know anything about me, my early years of life were chaos. When I was a child, I lived in an environment filled with chaos. It's very interesting to start noticing the patterns that start to emerge when you do dive deeper into this mental work and this energetic work. And for me, I saw a lot of things playing out that happened when I was younger. The things that I saw when I was younger, the things that I experienced when I was younger. And a lot of this stuff typically happened as a kid. In most people's cases, that's when you're the most vulnerable. That's when you consume a lot of information and you're like a sponge and you absorb everything. And this gets played out and it manifests in your life in so many ways. I mean, you could be with someone you love and you don't know how to love them, or you can be at a really you could have an incredible opportunity and completely just fuck that opportunity up because you're not ready mentally for it. And going on that topic of messing things up, I really got to a point where I was kind of tired of it, and I was almost bored of like messing things up and continuing to do that, and not dealing with the actual root of what was going on. And this medication really allowed for me to put a pause on all the bullshit thinking for a little bit. I still had a lot of it, but now I started dabbling into meditation. So now I started dabbling into what it means to wake up and try to get centered just for a little bit. And I would get 5-10 minutes in, and that was a lot. Like 5 minutes was so much for me to try to sit down and try to meditate. But I would fragment these little pieces of meditation throughout the week, and then it would fall off for a few days, and then I'll get back on it, and then maybe not meditate for a week, and then do it again. And I kept failing, but I was going towards something that was more sustainable. I was taking a step back from smoking weed a shit ton, drinking alcohol a bunch, and I really started looking into these different alternatives to make me feel good. Meditation was one of them. I also started really going hard into the vegan diet when I got my diagnosis. I think that was a really pivotal moment in my life when I said, you know what, if I am going to make a change within myself and I really want to get better, I think I need to change the foods that I'm eating. Because at the time I was lifting a bunch of weight, and I was eating a bunch of, rice, chicken, and broccoli, like typical bodybuilding meal. You see all the YouTube guys eating that chicken, rice, broccoli, eating a bunch of steak, eating a bunch of fish. And I heard a man talk about meat and how in the meat you are not just consuming the protein, you are consuming everything else within the meat. You are consuming the misery that was put into that. You are consuming the fear right before the animal died. It pumps out these hormones, and you're consuming that. I don't know if that's true or not. Like, I don't know if that's scientifically proven. I haven't looked into it, but it made sense to me at the paradigm that I was at. And I was so desperate to do anything to really get my mind in just a different place, because, like I said, I was fucking sick of feeling how I felt for so long, just feeling kind of hopeless and desperate in a lot of ways. So I started to meditate infrequently, and I really went hard with the vegan diet. Now, with this diet, I noticed a boom, like a skyrocket effect in my energy. And then all of a sudden, I started to dip down a little bit because I wasn't getting the proper nutrients in. I didn't even think to take vitamin D or vitamin B12. And then when I started taking those, my levels shot up again. And then I started managing my protein and my magnesium, my iron, all of the basic nutrients that you need and vitamins in order to sustain a healthy diet, especially if you're going more towards the vegan route. And it was a very pivotal moment in my life, changing up what I was consuming. It made the biggest impact on me. So as I am on this medication, I am actively moving towards something sustainable, because I realized, like, look, dude, like, you don't want to be the person in 10, 20 years where you're drinking fucking beers to cope with life. Like, you don't want to be the person that's constantly getting drunk, or the parent that can't really take care of their kids because they can't take care of themselves. Like, I never wanted to be that. You know, I grew up around that, and I was really, really sick of it. But it's funny how trauma repeats itself. It's like, what I was so afraid of, like, becoming, I was actually becoming, until I really stopped to take a step back and said, whoa, like, you need to make some major fucking changes, or else you're just going to end up like some people who you don't want to be like. From there, I really started to think about my habits. I started to cut out certain things. I started to cut out things like over consumption, over consuming in watching YouTube videos, maybe over consuming too much information without fully digesting it within my body and actually working on it. Cutting out things, living in a more simplistic manner. I remember I had bed bugs, and this really shitty studio apartment that I was living at the time furnished my couch that I slept on every night. It was my bed, it was a pull-out bed or whatever. Ended up getting bed bugs, and I put all of my stuff in the car, like a lot of my shoes, a lot of my clothes, a lot of my winter jackets, and it was like winter at the time. And that night, around like $2,000 worth of my belongings was stolen. And it was very interesting because around that same time, I was very much getting into Stoicism. I'm a big fan of Tim Ferriss and some of his teachings. And I was listening to one of his podcasts, and he brought up Stoicism. And one of the things that Stoicism talks about is the simplicity of life, and how we should try to train ourselves with living by the bare minimum, rather than having so much all the time and constantly living in luxury. Like, when you have money, try to wear the same shirt and the same pants and the same shoes maybe for a week. You know what I mean? Like, not saying like not to shower or whatever, but you get what I'm saying. Like, wear the same thing. You don't always have to dress up super fancy, or you don't have to have a bunch of things to feel whole. And when my car got broken into that night, I realized, like, oh my goodness, like, I just took a deep breath and felt so relieved that that happened in a lot of ways, because I feel like sometimes I got caught up in being defined with what I have and what I own and what's in my possession. And in reality, none of this shit is going with you when you're dead, you know. And it's so funny how, like, we get caught up in buying materials and having luxuries and getting social validation for it, and then it becomes like this defining factor for us, as if it's like a characteristic to our personality. Like, look what I have. Like, it's something to be said where when you are coming from a more full place, where you have a nice apartment that you live in, or you have a cool car, and you take your friends on a road trip, or you want to go do things with your family because you have money. And it's a different place mentally when you're coming from that, instead of trying to feel something that's empty. Fill. Anyways, I'm getting off on a rant. Let's go back to the next thing that really changed the course of my direction with manic depression and medication. So all of these things I'm starting to see, like, what do I cut out and what do I add in? So I cut out over consuming. I added in meditation. I added the vegan diet. I cut out meat, What's the next thing? Well, the next thing was, for me, stepping back from women. Now, this was very, very difficult for me because there's a period in time where I really started to think about why I was going out so much. Like, why am I going out so much? Why am I constantly hitting the bars? And why am I trying to look for someone to have like a good time with? And a good time, I mean, have sex with. Now, I realized that it was also coming from like a void type place. It was coming from a very hollow, empty place. Me trying to go out and meet all of these different women. And then the next day, I was even more empty than the night before I met that woman. And it's just so crazy to think that I got this mental and emotional high, you know, for however long you are engaged in sexual activity. And then after it, it's like, you're back to yourself. And I'm like, dude, how long are you going to keep repeating this? Like, how much longer are you going to stay empty? And you always hear like the definition of insanity is doing the same thing and thinking that you're going to get a different result. Well, I was in that place. I'm like, dude, it was funny because I was actually walking into like a bar one night, and I was about to open up the door, and it just hit me like, dude, you're doing the same thing. You're doing the same thing this weekend. And then come Monday, you're going to be like, I didn't meet, a cool girl. I still feel like, even if she was cool, it was still coming from that place of just emptiness. Not a place of abundance, not a place of joy or happiness. And I left that night. And I stopped going to bars and clubs for a few weeks. And I really just started to reflect for a little bit. And I started to read a little bit more and stop trying to fill myself with so many social interactions to try to escape here. You could escape by reading and cooking or doing whatever, but I think when you are aware of what you're doing and why you're cutting out certain things and adding in others, you start to move and you start to grow and can expand in that way, or contract if it's the point in your life where you need to kind of bring it in a little bit, right? And kind of keep to yourself and figure out your shit. The next thing beyond women was pornography. I remember I was so almost like dependent on pornography for a very, very long time. And it always frustrated me that I had this like psychological addiction to get on my phone and watch it and to masturbate or whatever. But I'm telling you, man, when I cut out pornography and really took a step back from that as well, and took a step back from masturbation, because that's also a form of instant gratification, right? When I took a step back from that, my mental stability was flatlining a little bit. Not in like a dead, like, I feel like a vegetable, but like in a time where I was feeling like this, up and down, up and down, up and down. It was just smooth. Like the process was somewhat normal. And I haven't really felt that in a long time. It's funny because I think that we go from children and being like our authentic self to adulthood, and somehow along the way on our journey we get very cemented, and it's hard to get out of that and to move forward. And we get so many different lenses to see life through. It's pretty wild to take those off and to see life in a different manner. I'm going to end this video with a story. And the story is about the time when I wanted to get off of medication. Now, I'm taking medication and everything is going well for about a year to 2 years. And I realized that the same thing that has given me life in a lot of ways as medication, that has allowed me to move forward and progress in my life, is bringing me down, and it's killing me in a lot of ways now. And it was around Thanksgiving time a few years ago. And I didn't tell anybody that I stopped taking the medication. I just stopped taking it for a few days. I just wanted to see what would happen with this vegan diet and the new meditation that I was doing. By the way, the meditation was on the Headspace app. I don't know if I mentioned that, but it's pretty solid. I would check it out. You get the first 10 sessions free. No one's paying me to say that. It's really helped me out, so I would recommend checking it out. I stopped taking my medication and I just didn't feel right. Not that I stopped taking my medication, but prior to that Thanksgiving holiday, I was feeling that I was plateauing in my life. I made all of these great goals, and I accomplished a lot of goals and did a lot of awesome things while I was on the medication. I was training a bunch. I was teaching more in martial arts. I competed in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu tournaments. I placed first in some of them, lost in some of them. I was just doing a lot of cool things, and I just realized in order to grow in this phase of my life, I think I need to get off the medication. But I really didn't know how, and I think deep down I knew that I would, but I just didn't know how I was going to do it. Anyways, a day or two after Thanksgiving, my friend comes over to my house, to my grandparents' house, Sacramento. And he's like, yo, what's up? Walks through my room, like, hey, what up, dude? Like, and he's a lifelong friend. I've known this guy since he is, like, since we were like 5 years old. We've known each other, 4 or 5 years old. And he's like, dude, you're packing already? I'm like, yeah, I got to go back to Reno, man. I got to teach classes or, and start training and all that. And I just talked to him like, yo, like, can I talk to you about some stuff? He's like, yeah, what's up? And I said, dude, it feels like I'm plateauing in my life in a lot of ways, and I really don't know how to get out of it. And the most important thing I think that I said is that I need to spiritually vomit. And he's like, I think I could understand that. And at the time, he had just come back from a sales job in Texas where he was experimenting with some psychedelics. And I was somewhat interested because when I looked at my friend's eyes, it was the first time that I really saw a free person. I was in awe because I never really noticed that from someone before. Someone who looks free in the eyes. And I really listened to what he had to say, and this is basically what he said. He's like, dude, I really don't know how to help you, but maybe we should do LSD together. And I was like, dude, are you fucking crazy? Like I don't know about that, man. Like I hear like horror stories about that and blah blah blah. long story short, I did my research and made a decision that night that I was going to do it the following day with him back in Reno. So I don't know if you could see here on this camera. Let me see. But we basically went. Anyways, you can't see it. Kind of. We basically went to a mountain in Reno, the place that I'm living right now, and dropped the LSD. Now, what was different about this experience? Well, I stopped taking my medication for like a week before that event. And I was very, very nervous when I took LSD. And I was walking on this trail. And then all of a sudden, I started to feel something in my body that was telling me to run. And it's so crazy because, like, up until that point, I never really listened to my body. It was like, here, thinking, do what your thoughts tell you. But something in here was just saying, run, shadowboxed. I just started shadowboxing. I started shadowboxing like in the middle of this mountain, in this like forest area. And I start running again. I'm running. I get all the way on top of this mountain, and it's warm and sunny outside, unlike today. And we're sitting on this dirt, and it's super warm outside. And we take our shoes off and put our bare feet in the gravel, the dirt, and I felt life force coming through my feet and into my body. And I know that sounds super, super hippy-dippy, but it was my truth. In that particular moment, I felt energy flowing through my body, real energy from the ground up coming through my body. And I didn't judge it. I just let it happen. I let this happen. And I lay down for a little bit, and it was just so overwhelming what was happening. And I feel like the things that I was thinking about and talking about were coming to life in a lot of ways, in terms of a lot of past trauma coming up with inside of me, but me not needing to say anything or speak about it. It was just coming up, and it was almost like I had to vomit a little bit, but I didn't. I told my friend, you know, man, it feels like I haven't laughed since I was 5 years old. And I started breaking down. I just cried. And he looked at me and he's like, dude, you haven't laughed in a long time. And I'm just like bawling there, like bawling like a kid, like a vulnerable child. And then I look at my friend, he looks at me, and we just start busting up laughing. I'm just like dying laughing, like laughing tears, like laughing where my stomach hurts. I need to grab my stomach. I'm like rolling around. And it was a discharge of trauma that I truly felt in that moment. It was a let go, a release, an energetic passing of something that came up. I'm not sure what it was, but it was very dark. Something very dark that left my body, and it was a very, very good thing, a very good feeling. After that, I get up and I'm looking around, and I take out my ID from my wallet, and I'm like, who the hell is this guy right here? And I'm like, his name is Chris Rios, but what is he really? And it was the first time it was really trippy, because it was the first time where I really kind of looked at myself in a picture and didn't know who I was, because all of my social lenses were taken off. Like everything that I thought about like society or politics or religion or whatever. It was like I saw life with no lenses. And it was crazy because I looked at this branch, this sagebrush, and it was almost like purple, like it was like a little hint of purple just like popping at me. And it was crazy because I'm like, dude, I think I'm seeing purple right now. And he's like, yeah, I don't know if you are, but like we should check it out. And we checked it out and it was purple. And it was, what was wild is that it was the first time that I was actually seeing that color on those branches. I passed through that trail so many times and I never once noticed it. I never once stopped to look at nature in that way. And it was pretty awesome to feel so connected and to take all of that in. Now, while I was sitting on the dirt, I remember feeling this life force from the sun just hold me like a father would hold his newborn son. It was just holding me and protecting me. And it was very, very intense and warm and loving in a very neutral type of way. A very masculine presence. Anyways, I got up. I'm looking at my friend, he's like hugging a tree. And he's like, dude, I understand hippies right now. And I'm just like, what the hell is going on, dude? What is my life? We start running again. We're just like running through this like foresty area. And I get to this tree and I'm looking at this tree and I'm like, dude, I want to climb this tree, but I'm kind of afraid that I won't be able to get down. He's like, dude, who cares? Like, if you want to do it, just climb it, and then we'll figure out from there. And I'm like, all right, fuck it. I start climbing up this tree, and then I get stuck at the halfway point. It was like kind of steep going up, and then it kind of like branched off like this, more of like a straight line the branch curved into. And I just laid on that tree. I put my head on it and just rested for a little bit. And again, like a lot of things with energy started like coming out, and I felt this tree's life force and energy, and it started connecting with mine. You ever see like those crazy psychedelic paintings, how like people are intertwining with the universe and like it's going into them and they're going into it? And look them up. You may know what I'm talking about, but look them up. They're pretty awesome. I felt like nurtured by this tree. I was just laying on it and just resting my head, and it felt like it was circulating its energy through my body. I think what LSD does in a very spiritual context, an energetic context, is that it opens you up. It opens your heart and your mind up so much. And you have to be careful, because you can get really, really bad quality shit that's laced with other stuff. And another reason why you have to be careful is because if you go out and use LSD in a club setting or more of like a superficial setting, I think it may break you down in some ways. I tried it. It wasn't a good experience. I tried it like way after this experience of what I was talking about, the one that I had with my friend. And anyways, getting back to the story, I'm just so energetically open to all of these elements within nature, and it really spoke to me and nurtured me in a lot of ways, and basically showed me that it was okay to be with my inner wounded child. I know that's very woo-woo, but hear me out here. I have had some experiences in the past that made it so difficult to be with myself, to really laugh, to really express myself. If I, even needed to cry or needed to use my voice in a lot of ways, I felt very restricted and constricted to this way of thinking and this way of being and feeling. And it was the first time in a very long time where I want to walk around now where I felt like things weren't so heavy. So where do I go from here? Oh, I'm having breakthroughs. Like, I'm having so many breakthroughs while I'm on this trip, this hallucinogenic trip. And I remember this lady was walking her dog as I was laying down on the tree, and I felt very like awkward and weird that somebody was passing me by, and I'm like, dude, what if they're judging me? Like, oh man, I feel so stupid right now. He's like, dude, who cares? Like, you're figuring out something that a lot of people wouldn't even care to look at or figure out. And she's walking a dog. Like, who gives a fuck, man? Like, stop thinking so much. You're good. And I was like, yeah, I am good. Like, I'm chilling. Because it's funny, I think when you get in your mind and you really try to start controlling things, especially when you are on a trip of some sort, it shows you how much control you don't have. Not necessarily that like the drug does this, but I think that it's not necessarily a metaphor, but it shows you a really strong piece of life, and how like you think you have a lot of control in your own life, but in reality your thoughts are probably not even your thoughts in a lot of ways. Anyways, I get back to my apartment that night with my friend, and we're talking, and he said, so are you going to start taking medication again after I leave? And I said, I don't know, man. I'm trying to figure that out. And he said, can I borrow your medication bottle? And I said, yeah, sure. And he's looking at it, and he's like, dude, you're taking something that literally gives you depression. Like, it literally says it on this bottle. I don't know if you ever read this bottle. And I'm like, no, honestly, dude, I didn't ever read that bottle. I just kind of took the meds that my psychiatrist was giving me, prescribed to me. And he's like, what's the worst thing that could happen if you stop taking it? I said, like, the worst thing that could happen is me going back to my suicidal thoughts and just feeling really kind of fucked up in a lot of ways. And he said, well, why don't you try to get there? And I'm like, I'm kind of afraid of that place. And he's like, don't be, dude. It's fine. Like, you got through it once, you can get through it again. But I think if you stay on this medication, you're not going to progress. And he was exactly right. And that's exactly what I needed to hear at that moment in my life. And that night, I dumped my medication down the toilet, so I had no temptation to take it whatsoever. And from that day on, I stopped taking it. Stopped taking the medication. I stuck to my vegan diet. Tried cutting out porn as much as I possibly could, but it's a struggle, man. Like, if you ever tried it, try to cut it out. You know how hard it is. Still cut that out to this day. At least I'm attempting to. And I'm very much consistent with my meditation now. You could see it in people's eyes, the groundedness and the centeredness in the pupils. That's really it, man, for this video. That's pretty much my story of while I was on medication and what it looked like and what it did for me, and the things that I did to get off of it. Now, a huge thing to note is that my friend was not a medication expert by any means. He was just a normal dude who wanted to give me some of his insight because I had asked for it. And that's the one thing that I could say, man, is just like, don't cut anybody out just because they're not a doctor or like a fucking expert in something. Don't cut them out. Don't rule them out, because it's a friend, it's a family, it's a just choked on some snow. It's a tree. It's really anything that can change your life in one instant. It's a substance. It's whatever it may be. Don't rule it out. Don't cut it out. Be open to it. That's really it. My last video is coming out on this topic of medication and manic depression. Stay tuned. Part 3 will be coming out soon. Until next time, done.